Okay, today we're going to talk about the industry and specifically how to do an industry analysis. The industry is a really important part of a business plan, and it's also important in just getting a feel for the idea if it's going to work. So you have to understand what industry you'll be competing in. An industry is a group of related companies or companies that produce products or services that are close substitutes. One of the great ways that you can look at the structure of industries or the classifications of those industries is by looking at the SIC code or the more recent NAICS codes. On the slides you'll see that there are two websites you can visit to look at SIC or NAICS codes. SIC is Standard Industrial Classification Code, and NAICS is North American Industrial Classification System. You can look then at data that's been collected to do your analysis by looking at these codes and looking at the industry information that's available online for each of those codes. Industries vary along a lot of different dimensions, and we're going to talk about those as we go along here. All right, so on the next slide you'll see there, why is the industry important? Well, an industry defines the playing field in which a company is going to participate. The industry analysis is a key aspect of evaluating the merits of a proposed business. And in the section, if you're doing a feasibility analysis, you're going to talk about the industry, and you're going to talk about it in the business plan. You really want to show the reader of these documents that you know what you're talking about, that you understand the industry, and you're not missing things like potential growth, the trends that are affecting the industry, the competition, and more on that in a couple of minutes. In a business plan, the industry analysis appears early in the plan so that it can set up the reader to understand where you're coming from in the later parts of the document. Barringer, on page 119 says, industry analysis is a foundational aspect of evaluating the merits of a prospective business venture. The industry that a company participates in as a result of its structural characteristics, historical conditions, and current trends basically defines the playing field that a firm will participate in. Because the industry analysis does affect the other sections, such as the target market, the financial projections, and so forth, you put it early in the business plan, as I mentioned, and you do your analysis relatively early in trying to figure out if the business is feasible or not. You use the information in the industry analysis to do your financial projections, your marketing, target market, marketing plans, etc. Okay, so if you look at the industry analysis, it helps you understand what companies against which you will compete, as well as trends and other potential things that will potentially affect your financial performance. So, for example, if you see that the industry is going to experience some turbulence or is going to go into a downturn because of the economy or some new technology that's being developed, you want to build that into your financial projections. And of course, the flip is also true. If you see a lot of potential growth, you can build your sales projections in the financial section. You want to make sure that you focus on your industry before you start figuring out which market you're going to target. So remember, the industry is a group of companies that produce similar products or services, while a target market is the group of a portion of the industry or a group of consumers or customers that you're going to focus upon and try to sell to. Most startups don't try to serve an entire industry. They carve out a specific segment so that they can specialize on addressing the needs and the wants of that segment. But you have to understand the industry before you can figure out which target market you want to go after. And that's, again, another reason that we do our industry analysis first. So you want to make sure that you define the industry. One way that you can do this is look at a potential competitor that's publicly traded, read about that particular company, and then try to figure out the SIC code or NAICS code from the description. So for example, if you want to do a bottled soft drink, you would look up reports on Coke and or Pepsi, PepsiCo, and try to figure out their SIC codes, and then go backwards to do your analysis. In addition to identifying the specific industry that you're going to compete in, you want to describe that industry. And what is it? Bottled soft drink, prepackaged software, for-profit online education. Sometimes a company will define the industry too narrowly and miss getting information that's available, or might define it too broadly, and so it's so generic that you really can't take the information and use it effectively in trying to figure out things like your potential revenue. Sometimes you operate in 2 or more industries, and that can be tricky. You have to analyze both industries to effectively communicate what you're trying to in the business plan or the feasibility assessment. When you have a new or innovative product or service, and there's no official industry, that's a challenge, and what you have to do in that case is look for similar industries and try to extrapolate information from those industries to try to describe what you're trying to produce. Some other things you want to put in a business plan include the size of the industry in terms of revenue, number of establishments, employees, and you can get all this information once you get the SIC code using analyst reports, databases that are available through the Westchester University Library online databases. You want to talk about the growth rate over the last 5 years in terms of percentage of revenue. Last year, from last year to this year, the growth was 110%, for example. The number of establishments, how they've grown, as well as employees. You're trying to paint the picture that this is an attractive industry to enter. As far as sales projections, you want to talk about what's going to happen over the next 2 years. The dollar revenue as well as percentage growth rate. Graphics are helpful. Plotting things in line graphs and bar charts are really helpful to try to communicate this information, especially a positive upward trend. If you have regional and local data, let's say related to Chester County or the state of Pennsylvania or the Mid-Atlantic, if you're going to operate in this region, that's always helpful. If you look at the next slide, you'll see industry structure. You want to talk about the breadth of the structure. Is it local? Is it regional? Is it global? National? What is it? Is the industry fragmented, meaning there are a lot of individual unaffiliated companies that operate in this industry, or is it concentrated and consolidated? As far as the extent of competition, how concentrated is the industry? You can get that information from the market share reporter. You want to talk about it in terms of what percentage do the largest companies in the industry capture. And any other noteworthy characteristics, things like using Porter's 5 forces, which are outlined at the end of this PowerPoint presentation. When we talk about fragmented versus, and that should be consolidated, you'll see that fragmented, many firms, no dominant firm, versus on the other side of the continuum, again, this should be consolidated, one or more firm, one firm or one dominant firm and monopoly. These, of course, are the 2 ends of the continuum. You might have an oligopoly or a duopoly. Porter's 5 forces, you can see them here. Again, they're listed at the end of the PowerPoint presentation. You want to also identify the industry leaders. What are the names of the largest companies in a particular industry? Again, soft drink industry. You're talking about Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and Schweppes. You want to talk about their sales revenue, the market share that they hold, and a short description of each company. If you're talking about a local region, let's say you want to set up a restaurant in the borough of Westchester, you might want to talk about the largest restaurants in that particular borough in terms of revenue, floor size, and other descriptors. You might also want to talk about the industry life cycle. And if you look at this graph, this is the typical graph. Demand is on the y-axis, time is on the x. You can see that in the early stage of an industry, when the demand is very low, we're in the embryonic stage. Then you proceed to the growth and the shakeout and the maturity and the decline. It might be more like an S-shaped curve if it's a technology industry, but this is the typical pattern that an industry would follow. If you can demonstrate that you're in the early stage or the growth stage, it can be very attractive when you're talking to potential investors. They want to invest in an up and coming industry. You also want to identify industry segments. An industry is composed of different segments, and in your book there's a nice description of those segments in the fitness industry. Two common segments include product type and customer segment. You want to report the percentage of the total industry revenue that is captured by each segment, so you can get a breakdown of which are the attractive industries, at least currently, which of the segments are most attractive in a particular industry. Sometimes we talk about strategic groups. These would be defined clusters of competitors that share some similar characteristics. And here's an example of the restaurant industry and strategic groups. If you plot them based upon price and selection, you'll see that the fast food industry, we're talking about McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, etc., is in the lower left quadrant, and then you can see more selection, higher prices are near the top there with the upscale chains, and of course on the far right, diners and family style restaurants offer you a wide selection but are moderately priced. You want to talk about the cost structure in terms of ratios, and you can get those when you read industry reports, when you look at hoovers.com, Mintel, and so forth. You want to report the key ratios and other ratios of interest. For example, in the grocery industry, if you want to start a market, you want to talk about inventory turnover. You want to talk about gross profit, things like that. These ratios are meant to provide insight into the structure and the attractiveness of an industry. You want to show how much capital or how many assets have to be held in relationship to, let's say, financing in terms of debt-to-asset ratios. And then you want to talk about the key success factors. What makes companies in an industry successful? Select about 6 to 10 of these. Again, you can get these from your research, reading about the industry. Things like product features, brand name recognition, quality of the product, ease of use, access to distribution channels, marketing support, and customer service. Some other factors, we talked about how the industry is set up in terms of, is it local, national, or international? Again, you might want to talk about that. How sensitive is this industry to business cycle? And what's the elasticity of demand? What happens to demand as price increases? You also want to talk about the industry trends in terms of the environmental trends, the pest analysis, political factors, economic factors, sociocultural, demographic characteristics, as well as the last one there, technological. What things are happening in terms of regulations when you talk about the political environment, or perhaps deregulation. In terms of the economic, what's happening to the money supply and the interest rate. Sociocultural and demographic, you're looking at things like how people spend their time, how they spend their money, educational levels, aging population, etc. As far as technological, new technology, the use of the internet, life science, and so forth, biotechnology. In addition to environmental trends, we're talking about business trends as well, and you want to look at things like profit margin, the level of innovation in an industry, input costs, what's involved there, are they increasing, decreasing, and so forth, and are there new markets developing? Make sure you include in your business plan the long-term prospects of an industry. So you want to conclude the business plan with a brief statement about your beliefs regarding the long-term prospects for the industry. Don't present any new information. Everything that's been presented so far in this section, you're summarizing and highlighting important parts. And then you want to be precise and to the point. And this is where you can really capture the reader's attention and have them buy into your proposed idea. Okay, so take a look at the appendix. There's more information there about the industry life cycle as well as the 5 forces.